We'll start by placing the back outer corset piece with the back center corset piece and sewing them together after aligning the notches. Next, we'll add in the back center piece. This is just one piece. You'll align the notches and sew down the pinned seam. You'll repeat the same thing for the remaining back corset pieces. Next, you'll find the center of the back waist edge and the top of the corset pieces. Align those center points, pin the outer points, and then curve the corset pieces to the back bodice pieces. And then you'll sew along the pinned seam. You can finish these seams with a serger. You can press them open or you can finish them with bias, however you would like to enclose the seams. Afterwards, you'll want to press the seam allowance up towards the neckline of the back bodice. We'll repeat the same process, but with the front corset pieces. So place the outer corset piece on the front center corset piece and sew along the pinned seam. Next, you'll add the front inner corset piece to the front middle corset piece. Align the notches, pin together, and then sew along the pinned seam. Next, you'll take the corset pieces and align them to the front bodice. Line up the center points, then line up the outer points, and then carefully pin these opposite curves together. Try not to stretch or create any pinching along the pinned seam. It should smoothly work together as you sew. Take your time to gently ease these opposite curves together as you sew along the pinned seam, making sure that there's no buckling or overlapping. You'll repeat that same entire process with the other remaining front piece. Next, we're going to sew up the side seams. So start by pinning together the waist seam, the bottommost point of the side seam, and the space in between will ease together. And then find the underarm point, pin that together, and ease the rest together. Then you'll bring the front neckline and shoulder up towards the back neckline and shoulder and pin in place along that curved seam. You'll sew from the neckline to the shoulder point and down the side seam. For best results, you'll sew from the bottom point up to the underarm, and then from the shoulder point towards the neckline on both sides to avoid anything getting wonky or stretched out in the opposite direction. You'll repeat the same exact process for the remaining front piece. Again, sewing in the same direction that you did on the other side. Next, we'll work on the thumb hole cuff. You'll mark onto the thumb hole cuff portion where to sew and where to leave open. Sew between the markings, leaving the space open according to the pattern piece. After you sew, you'll be able to press that seam open and see two equal distant openings along that seam allowance. Fold the cuff in half, bringing wrong sides together. And then you'll be able to see that thumb hole cuff opening. You can pin the opening in place. Next, you'll gently turn the cuff kind of inside out and bunched up a little bit underneath your presser foot. And you'll sew each of the openings closed along that folded seam allowance. Sew slowly and take lots of care not to overlap portions of the cuff. Just sew along that inner seam allowance that was folded in. I like to sew across the seam and then down the opposite side. And then pivot one more time and sew across back to your original starting point. This creates a thumb hole cuff with a nice finished opening. I think that looks nice. All right, let's work on the sleeve. You'll place the side seams together with right sides touching, pin along that side seam, sew it up, and then you'll keep that folded cuff, slide it inside of your sewn sleeve, line up those side seams of the cuff with your sleeve, line up those edges as well, making sure to catch both layers of the cuff. And then you'll sew around that pinned edge carefully, going through both cuff layers and one layer of the sleeve. You'll pull the cuff inside out, turn the sleeve right side out, and keep the jacket wrong side facing out. Slide the sleeve into the jacket, making sure that the front of the sleeve will align with the front of the jacket, and the back of the sleeve that has the two notches aligns with the back armhole opening of the jacket that should also have two notches. So you'll line up your notches at the underarm point, at the top seam point, and then towards the back underarm, and kind of ease the sleeve to the jacket armhole opening and pin it along the way. You'll sew around that pinned seam. You can finish that seam with a serger, and then you'll pull the sleeve outside of the jacket so that right sides are facing out. You'll repeat that whole process with the other thumb hole cuff, the other sleeve, and the other armhole opening. Next, we'll work on the zipper. You want to be sure to have a separating zipper. You'll start by placing the zipper right side of the zipper to the right side of the jacket front, leaving a 1/2 inch of the jacket hem to hang below the bottom of the zipper. Go ahead and pin or clip the zipper to the jacket. Remember, the right sides of the zipper teeth and the zipper pull should be facing or touching the jacket right side. You'll stop pinning 1/2 inch from the neckline. Fill in with as many clips or pins as you'd like. Then, using a zipper foot attachment on your sewing machine, you'll sew the zipper to the jacket with right sides touching. I like to start at the bottom of my zipper and sew up towards the neckline of my jacket. You'll want to keep this process or flow the same for both sides, or things may get wonky and out of alignment. Remember to stop sewing your zipper 1/2 inch from the top neckline. If you feel like your knit is too slippery or is giving you a hard time, you can also use knit stabilizer, maybe a 1-inch strip or a 1/2 inch strip wide down the front center of both sides of your jacket. This will help stabilize the zipper. So we're going to do the same process on the other side of the front bodice. You'll start by aligning the waist points. Then you can move on to align the neckline points. Remember, you're going to stop sewing 1/2 inch from the neckline, just like you did on the first side. And then you can go ahead and fill in the remaining space from the waistline seam to the neckline with extra pins. You'll move down and pin the zipper bottom 1/2 inch from the bottom of the jacket, and then ease the jacket to the zipper the rest of the way, all the way up to the waistline seam. Pin as many pins as you want, but you want to be sure that the neckline, the hemline, and the waist seam all align for both sides of the zipper. Starting at the bottom of your jacket, you'll sew up the zipper on the opposite side, or whatever direction you went for the other side. You want to repeat that for this side as well. It just makes the jacket lay nicer. The seams look better if you are sewing in the same direction on both sides. So you'll sew all the way, leaving 1/2 inch remaining. At this point, if the zipper fits well, it looks good, you can move on to finishing the neckline. So starting with the one side of the neckline, you'll see that the zipper teeth extend past. You can go ahead and clip as soon as the seam is stopping at the neckline. Clip away the zipper teeth. You don't want to sew over zipper teeth. That'll probably cause your needle to break. So as long as you're above that seam or that stitching, you can clip off the zipper teeth. So you'll take the facing and pin one of the outer edges of the facing to the zipper side of the jacket, and then continue pinning the facing to the neckline. So the right side of the facing is facing the right side of the jacket. The zipper teeth are turned inwards towards the sleeves. They should be facing inwards, and the zipper is on the outermost side. So you'll sew the facing to the jacket, the neckline, and then you can change your presser foot back to a zipper foot if that helps. And you'll sew down that front edge. This will enclose the top point of your zipper. Oops, sorry. So once you make it just on the other side of the zipper teeth, you'll pivot and sew down, basically stitching exactly on the same stitch line that you used to attach the zipper to the jacket. So when you flip the facing towards the inside of the neckline, you'll see that nice finished edge. I like to stitch in the ditch along the facing to secure the seam allowance towards the facing along the neckline. After you do that, you can secure the facing at the shoulder seam. So place the neckline underneath your presser foot, smooth out the facing, make sure that it's not bunched or overstretched, and you'll stitch in the ditch down the neckline to the shoulder, just on the other side of the facing. And that will help kind of hold it in place. You can also use fusible webbing to attach the facing to the neckline if you want a little bit more stability there as well. Last step here, we will be hemming the jacket. One tip I have is to shorten the differential of your serger. This kind of creates a slight gathering to the bottom curved edge of your jacket, but you'll just fold up 1/2 inch right in line with the zipper bottom and pin, and then sew along that pinned seam. You can use knit hem tape that might help secure the seam while you're trying to sew it. You can also use bias or a satin ribbon, and then fold up that 1/2 inch satin ribbon or bias at the bottom of your jacket. Fold it up and inwards towards your jacket inside, and that creates a beautiful finish too. Lots of options.